She slammed her folder shut, looked that board of directors dead in the eyes, and said, "Fire me. I dare you." That was Victoria Hale, CEO of a $400 million company, 38 years old, and sitting in a wheelchair she never asked for. But the night that would change everything? It started with a blind date she almost didn't show up to. A single dad carrying gas station flowers, and a group of women with hidden cameras who thought the whole thing was a joke. They were wrong. Dead wrong. Drop your city in the comments right now. Let's see how far this story travels. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. You're going to want to see how this ends. The flowers were Daniel's idea. Not roses, he wasn't that guy, and he knew it. He'd grabbed a mix of yellow and white daisies from the stand outside the corner store on 5th, the kind that cost $6 and came wrapped in plain green paper. He stood outside Calla & Co., the cafe on Meridian Street, holding them like he wasn't sure whether to go in or turn around and drive home. He almost turned around. He'd been standing there for 3 minutes. He'd checked his watch twice. He'd straightened his collar once. A navy button-down he'd ironed himself that morning, while his daughter Lily watched cartoons on the couch and asked him, "Daddy, where are you going tonight?" He hadn't had a good answer for that. "Just dinner, Bug," he'd said. "With a lady?" He'd paused too long. Lily had grinned like she already knew the answer. And that grin, that little 7-year-old grin with a missing front tooth, was the reason he was still standing outside this cafe instead of driving home to leftovers and a history documentary. Daniel Hayes took a breath, pushed open the door, and walked in. Across the street, in a silver SUV with tinted windows, 4 women watched him on a tablet screen. The camera feed was coming from a small device the size of a coat button, stuck to the base of a potted fern near the hostess stand inside Calla & Co. Sandra Myers had put it there herself 40 minutes ago, right after she'd made the reservation under a fake name and tipped the hostess $50 to seat the couple at table 7, the one closest to the fern. Sandra was 41, sharp-jawed, and had the kind of laugh that made people uneasy without knowing why. She was the one who'd set this whole thing up. She was also the one who had placed the bet. "He's going in," said Bree from the back seat, leaning over the console to squint at the screen. Bree was younger, maybe 34, and she wore her cruelty more casually than Sandra did. She didn't even know it was cruelty. She just thought it was fun. "How long you giving him?" asked Denise from the passenger seat. Denise was the quiet one of the group, which mostly meant she watched instead of participated. But she never said stop, either. 10 minutes, Sandra said. Tops. Once he sees the chair, he's going to make some excuse and bolt. What's the over-under on the excuse? Bree asked. I've got my money on early morning, Sandra said. He looks like an early morning guy. Bree laughed. He looks like a Home Depot guy. They weren't entirely wrong about Daniel. He was a mechanic. Hayes Auto, a 2-bay shop he ran himself on Culver Road. The kind of place where people left their cars because they trusted him, not because his waiting room had good magazines. He was 39, broad-shouldered, with the kind of hands that had seen real work and never apologized for it. He wasn't polished. He wasn't a CEO or a surgeon or a man who knew the difference between a Bordeaux and a Burgundy. But he had shown up. With flowers. And he hadn't looked at his phone once. Sandra tracked him on the screen as the hostess led him toward table 7. And then she zoomed in on the woman already seated at the table. Victoria Hale had arrived 12 minutes early. She was wearing a charcoal blazer over a soft cream blouse, her dark hair pulled back at the sides, the rest falling over her shoulders. She was reviewing something on her phone when Daniel arrived at the table. Some spreadsheet or email. Something that clearly mattered to her more than this date already did. She didn't look up immediately. Daniel stood there for a half-second, and then, because he was Daniel Hayes and not someone who waited for an invitation, he said, "Victoria?" She looked up, and for just a moment, just one frame of a moment that the hidden camera almost certainly didn't catch, something moved across her face. Not quite surprise, not quite relief. Something more complicated than both. "You must be Daniel," she said. "That's me." He held out the daisies. "I know they're not much, but they seemed like the kind of flowers that actually wanted to be cut, if that makes any sense." Victoria blinked. She looked at the daisies, then back at him. "That's a strange thing to say," she said. "Yeah." He sat down across from her. "I say strange things sometimes. Fair warning." In the silver SUV across the street, Sandra leaned closer to the screen. He hadn't flinched. He'd sat down like it was nothing, like the wheelchair wasn't a test, like the whole setup didn't exist. Sandra's jaw tightened slightly. "He's still there," Bree said, with something that might have been the beginning of disappointment. "Give it a minute," Sandra said. Victoria set her phone face down on the table. That was a thing she didn't usually do. Her phone was always face up, always one notification away from commanding her full attention, because that was the nature of running a company with 412 employees and a quarterly earnings call in 11 days. Her phone didn't go face down. She wasn't sure why she'd done it. Maybe it was the daisies, which she'd set beside her water glass, and was refusing to look at because they were making her feel something she didn't want to feel on a first date that she'd agreed to against her better judgment. "So," Daniel said, opening his menu, "who set you up? Because whoever set me up owes me a full explanation and possibly a beer." Victoria almost smiled. "My assistant, Rachel. She apparently decided that I work too much and need—" She paused. "Enrichment." "Enrichment," Daniel repeated. "Like a zoo animal." "That's what I said." "Who set me up?" "I don't know. Rachel coordinated with someone named Marcus?" Daniel closed his eyes briefly. "Marcus, my brother-in-law. I'm going to kill him." "He told Rachel you were emotionally unavailable but fixable," Victoria said. There was a beat. "Emotionally unavailable," Daniel said slowly. His words. "Is that why you agreed to this? To fix me?" Victoria looked at him steadily. "I agreed to this because Rachel guilted me for 45 minutes, and I have trouble saying no to people who cry." "Does she cry often?" "Only when she wants something." "Smart woman." "Infuriatingly so." The waiter came. Daniel ordered a coffee and whatever soup was good today. Victoria ordered sparkling water and the salmon. The waiter left. The cafe hummed around them. Low music, soft voices, the clink of silverware. Daniel looked at Victoria across the table and said, "Can I ask you something direct?" "You can ask," she said. "I reserve the right not to answer." "Fair." He folded his hands on the table. "How long has it been since you've been on a date that wasn't some kind of business dinner in disguise?" Victoria's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes, just slightly, like a door closing quietly in a hallway. "A while," she said. "How long is a while?" "That's a follow-up question. I only agreed to the first one." Daniel nodded slowly. "Okay, my turn. Ask me something direct." She looked at him for a moment, studying him in the way that, he would come to understand, was Victoria Hale at her most honest. She assessed before she committed. She read a room before she entered it. It was how she survived in boardrooms where people underestimated her daily. It was also how she'd survived the 2 years after the accident, when the people who'd claimed to love her had quietly, one by one, found reasons to be elsewhere. "Why are you actually here?" she asked. Daniel didn't hesitate. Because my daughter told me she wanted me to stop eating cereal alone, and I thought she deserved better than a father who gave up on the whole idea." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was the other kind. The kind that comes after something true has been said in a room, and everything else has to wait for it to settle. "How old is she?" Victoria asked. 7. Lily. He pulled out his phone, just for a second, and turned it to show a photo. A little girl, with a gap-toothed grin and paint on her left cheek, holding up a drawing of what appeared to be either a horse or a large dog. Victoria looked at the photo. "She's beautiful," she said, and she meant it without qualification. "She's a disaster," Daniel said, with the full warmth of a man who found that disaster to be the best part of his life. "She painted the dog last Tuesday. I told her it looked great. She told me I was a bad liar and painted over it." Victoria said nothing, but the corner of her mouth moved, just barely. Outside, in the SUV, Bree was checking her nail polish. "This is taking forever," she said. "He's still there," Sandra said. Her voice was harder now, not angry, but the close cousin of angry. The voice of someone whose prediction is failing in real time and who cannot fully admit it yet. Denise said nothing. She was watching the screen with her arms crossed and her expression unreadable. "Maybe he hasn't noticed yet," Bree offered. "He's been sitting across from her for 15 minutes, Sandra said. "He's noticed." "So why is he still there?" Sandra didn't answer that. The truth, the one she wouldn't say out loud in the car, was that she had expected this part to be quick. She had run versions of this scenario in her mind, and in every version, the mechanic from Culver Road took one look at the wheelchair, made small talk for the minimum socially survivable time, and then left. And the video would confirm what Sandra had always privately believed, that most people, faced with the inconvenient reality of someone else's body, chose the easier door. Sandra had met Victoria Hale at a charity event 14 months ago. They had been seated at the same table. Sandra had smiled at her, and Victoria had been polite, but not warm. And at some point during the evening, a mutual acquaintance had mentioned that Victoria's company was in the running for the Hargrove contract. The same contract Sandra's husband's firm was bidding on. The Hargrove contract went to Victoria's company. Sandra had told herself, afterward, that the setup had nothing to do with that. That this was just something funny between friends. That it wasn't personal. But she'd placed a $500 bet on how fast Daniel would leave, and she'd been the one to find him. A divorced mechanic. A guy she'd assumed wouldn't be able to handle anything complicated. And she'd been the one to make sure that camera was positioned perfectly at table 7. It was personal. She just couldn't say so out loud. Inside the cafe, Daniel had put his coffee down and was leaning forward slightly, elbows on the table, with a particular posture of a man who has decided he is no longer holding anything back tonight. "You want to know what I was told about you?" he said. Victoria's eyes narrowed, barely. "What were you told?" "That you're brilliant, you run some kind of tech company, and that you're—" He paused, choosing the word carefully. "Difficult." "Difficult," she repeated. That was Marcus's word. He said it like a warning. "And you came anyway." "Difficult is just another word for someone who knows what they want," Daniel said. "I don't think that's a bad thing." Victoria looked at him for a long moment. There was a thing she did when she was thinking, a slight tilt of her head, almost imperceptible, and Daniel didn't know yet what it meant. But he noticed it. "What about you?" she said. "What would your warning label say?" "Mine?" He thought about it genuinely, which she appreciated. He didn't deflect. He didn't give a rehearsed, humble brag. He actually sat there and thought about it. "Mine would say, works too much, takes too long to ask for help, and still has his daughter's artwork taped to the refrigerator at age 39. He paused. Also, I talk to my truck sometimes, when it's being difficult. You name it? Her name is Charlene. Victoria's expression broke. Not fully, not the way it would later in the evening, but it moved. A small fracture in the composure she'd been maintaining since before she arrived. The composure she wore like armor into every room, every meeting, every interaction that had the potential to disappoint her. That's ridiculous, she said. Charlene starts every time, Daniel said. She's earned the name. That's not how naming works. That's exactly how naming works. The waiter returned with food. They both reached for their forks at the same time, and their eyes met briefly, and neither of them made a joke about it, which was somehow funnier than if they had. The thing about Victoria Hale that the people who reduced her to a title and a wheelchair never understood was this. She had been funny before the accident. Not just politely funny, actually funny. The kind of funny that her college roommate had called dangerous, because once you got her going, she wouldn't stop, and the things she said would stay with you for days. She'd had a whole life built around the particular pleasure of a perfectly timed observation. She'd had a group of friends who called her first when something absurd happened, because Victoria would know exactly what to say about it. The accident had not taken her legs. That was the misunderstanding most people carried, that it had been some catastrophic, life-ending event. It had been a car crash on a rainy Tuesday, and it had damaged her spinal cord in a specific way that her neurosurgeon had explained with diagrams and statistics. And the result was that some days she could stand briefly, and some days she couldn't. And wheelchair was easier and safer, and so that was that. What the accident had taken, quietly, insidiously, over the months that followed, was the willingness to be funny in front of strangers, because strangers had started looking at her differently after. And when you're already managing how someone is reading your body, your worth, your capability, when you're already running that calculation every time you enter a room, it stops feeling safe to also be unguarded. It stops feeling safe to be the person who makes jokes and shows her hand. It had been 2 years. She hadn't been on a real date in 2 years. She'd had dinners, business meals with pleasant men who'd been vetted by mutual connections, and who had all, at some point, done the thing she was waiting for everyone to do. The slightly too long glance at the wheelchair, the extra careful enunciation, the moment when they treated her like a project instead of a person. She had stopped going after the 7th one. Rachel had cried for 45 minutes before Victoria said yes to tonight, and even then, she'd arrived 12 minutes early, not because she was eager, but because she wanted to already be seated, already composed, already in her own space before he walked in. She didn't want him to see her coming through the door. She didn't want to navigate that first moment where a man's face recalibrated in real time. She had planned her exit. She'd told Rachel to call her at 8:15 with a work emergency if she texted the word pivot. She had not texted pivot. It was 8:40. "Tell me about the shop," she said. Daniel looked up from his soup, a little surprised by the question. Most people, when they asked about the shop, did it as filler, the polite inquiry that led to a polite answer that led to a redirect towards something more interesting. They didn't actually want to know. "Why?" he asked. "Because you light up when you mention it," she said. "And I find it interesting when people light up." He considered that. Then he told her. He told her about the shop on Culver Road, how he'd bought it from old Earl Pruitt 8 years ago with a loan he'd spent 2 years paying back early. He told her about the way a cold engine turns over on a January morning, the particular satisfaction of finding a problem that everyone else had missed. He told her that Lily came in on Saturday sometimes and sat on an overturned milk crate and narrated what he was doing, like a sports commentator, and that twice she'd correctly diagnosed an issue before he had. and he didn't know if that was genius or alarming. He told her about the year after his wife left, not in a wounded way, not asking for sympathy, just with the matter-of-fact honesty of a man who had processed the hard thing and was no longer bleeding from it. "She left when Lily was 3, he said. She didn't leave because of anything dramatic. She just decided that the life we had wasn't the life she wanted. And I spent a year being angry about that. And then I spent about 6 months understanding it. And now we're at a place where Lily has 2 parents who are okay, which is better than a lot of people get." Victoria was quiet. "You're not going to tell me I deserved better?" Daniel said. "I don't know you well enough to say that," Victoria said. "And I think you've told yourself that story enough that you don't need it from me." He looked at her. "That's the most honest thing anyone said to me on a date," he said. "Have you been on many dates since?" 4. He held up 4 fingers. 2 of them were weird. One was fine, but she was clearly more interested in Lily than me, which I understand, but also, no. And one ended early because she got a call about her cat. "What was wrong with the cat?" "I don't know. I was afraid to ask." Victoria laughed. It was small. Barely a laugh, really. More of a break in the surface of her composure. But it was real, and Daniel heard it, and he filed it away somewhere important. Across the street, Sandra had put down the tablet. Bree was on her phone now, scrolling through something, losing interest in the surveillance she'd been so excited about an hour ago. Denise was still watching the tablet where Sandra had left it on the console. She could see them on the small screen. Daniel leaning back in his chair now, relaxed, and Victoria with her hands around her water glass, and the 2 of them talking like people who had forgotten they were being watched. Like people who had forgotten, for the moment, that the world had any opinions about them at all. "Sandra," Denise said quietly. "What?" "I don't think he's leaving." Sandra picked up the tablet, looked at the screen, set it back down. "The night's not over," she said. But her voice had changed. It was smaller now, compressed. The voice of a bet that was going badly, and a person who could not yet admit the reason that bothered her. Bree looked up from her phone. "What do we do if he doesn't leave?" Sandra said nothing. Outside, through the cafe window, the regular window, not the camera feed, Denise could see 2 people at a table with daisies beside a water glass, talking in the unhurried way that people talk when they have decided, without saying so, that they are in no particular rush to be anywhere else. She uncrossed her arms. She said nothing about that either. At table 7, Daniel had asked Victoria what her company did. The real version, not the elevator pitch. And Victoria, who had given the elevator pitch so many times it had stopped meaning anything to her, found herself giving him the real version instead. She told him about the software her company built for healthcare systems, specifically for accessibility and patient navigation tools, which was either ironic or fitting, depending on how you looked at it. She told him how she'd started it from a consulting contract at 29, and how she'd been dismissed by 11 different investors before the 12th one read the full proposal instead of just the first page. She told him about the Tuesday afternoon, 2 years ago, when a rain-slicked off-ramp on Route 9 had introduced her to a neurosurgeon named Dr. Kowalski, who had a very steady voice and a very direct manner of explaining things, and how she had lain in a hospital bed running financial projections in her head because that was easier than thinking about everything else. "That's how you coped?" Daniel asked. "That's how I survived," she said. There was a difference in the words, and they both heard it. "I'm sorry," he said. Not in the reflexive, filler word way. He said it the way you say it when you mean it, and you know it doesn't fix anything, and you're saying it anyway because the person in front of you deserves to hear that someone is sorry for the hard thing that happened to them. Victoria nodded once. She didn't redirect. She didn't deflect with humor or a business update. She just accepted it, which was itself a small act of courage. "The company nearly fell apart that year," she said. "People thought I would step back. Some of them hoped I would. There was a board member, Hargrove actually, he's since been removed, who told my COO while I was still in rehab that the company needed stable leadership. What happened to him? I came back," she said it simply, "6 weeks early. Walked into that boardroom, well," she paused, "rolled in. And I told him that stability was exactly what I intended to provide, and that if he had concerns about my leadership, he was welcome to raise them to my face." "And did he?" "No, he sent an email." Daniel shook his head, smiling. "And you're still running the company. 412 employees, quarterly earnings call in 11 days, and a board that currently has no members who believe stability is a synonym for able-bodied." "Good." "It took a while." "Most good things do," Daniel said. Victoria looked at him across the table. This man with gas station daisies and a truck named Charlene, and a 7-year-old who narrated engine repairs like a sportscaster, and felt something shift in her chest. Not dramatically. Not the way they wrote it in books, the sudden knowing, the certainty. More quietly than that. More the way a window opens in a room that's been closed too long, and the air moves, and you hadn't realized until just then how still everything had been. She reached for her water glass. "You're not what I expected," she said. Daniel tilted his head. "What did you expect?" She thought about it. "I expected to be managing the situation by now," she said. "What does that mean?" "It means I expected to be working harder," she said. "To keep things comfortable, to not let anything get too real." She looked at the daisies beside her glass. "You didn't give me time to manage it." Daniel picked up his coffee cup, found it empty, set it back down. "Would you have wanted to?" The question sat between them, honest and undefended, and Victoria thought about it with the seriousness it deserved. "No," she said finally. "I don't think I would." The cafe moved around them. Other tables, other conversations, the soft sound of a city evening doing what city evenings did. And at table 7, 2 people who had arrived with their armor fully on had, without planning it and without permission from anyone outside that room, taken the first quiet step toward putting some of it down. Outside, the SUV was still parked across the street. But Sandra had stopped watching the feed. The waiter came back to clear their plates, and Daniel ordered another coffee without asking Victoria if she wanted anything else. Then caught himself and looked at her. "Sorry, do you want something? Dessert? More water?" "I'm fine," she said, and then, because it was true, "Thank you for asking." It was such a small thing. He'd stopped mid-order to ask. Not because it was protocol, not because etiquette demanded it, just because she was sitting across from him and it occurred to him that she might want something, and he checked. Victoria had been in rooms with men who talked over her, past her, and occasionally directly to whoever was standing behind her wheelchair, as if she were a display piece rather than the person in charge. She had sat through meetings where men with inferior proposals and superior confidence explained her own industry to her. She had attended dinners where someone, always with the warmest intentions, always with a smile that meant well, had cut her food for her without asking. Daniel Hayes had stopped mid-coffee order to ask if she wanted anything. She filed that away in the same place she kept the things that mattered. "Actually," she said, "I'll have a decaf, if you're asking." "I'm asking," he said. He told the waiter. The waiter left, and they settled back into the rhythm of the evening that had, somewhere between the soup and the salmon and the story about Lily's sports commentary, stopped feeling like a first date and started feeling like something harder to name. Sandra had gotten out of the SUV. Bree was still inside, fully committed to her phone now. Whatever interest she'd had in the evening officially surrendered. Denise had stepped out a few minutes earlier, ostensibly to get some air. But she was standing on the sidewalk with her arms crossed and her eyes on the cafe window. And Sandra knew she wasn't just getting air. Sandra stood beside her. Neither of them spoke for a moment. "He hasn't left," Denise said. "I can see that." "It's been over an hour." Sandra's jaw was tight. She had the look of a woman doing the internal work of adjusting a narrative that was no longer cooperating. And she wasn't doing it gracefully. She reached into her bag, took out her phone, and pulled up the timer she'd started when Daniel first walked into the cafe. 1 hour, 7 minutes. "Maybe he's just polite," Sandra said. "Some guys will sit through anything rather than be rude." "Does he look like he's sitting through something?" Denise asked. Sandra didn't answer, because the answer, visible even from the sidewalk, through the cafe's front window, was no. He did not look like a man sitting through something. He looked like a man who had arrived somewhere unexpectedly good and had no intention of rushing toward the exit. "Sandra," Denise said carefully. "What? Why does it matter this much?" The question landed somewhere specific. Sandra didn't flinch, exactly, but something in her posture changed. A small shift, a slight tightening, the physical language of a person who has been asked a question they prepared an answer for and no longer quite believe. "It doesn't matter," Sandra said. "It's a bet. It's $50. "It was 500, Denise said. "It's a social experiment." "Sandra, what do you want me to say, Denise?" "I want you to say whatever's actually true," Denise said quietly. "Because I've known you for 11 years, and I can see when you're running from something. And right now, you are running from something." Sandra said nothing. She looked at the cafe window, at the two figures at the table inside. The man with the easy posture, and the woman who, even from this distance, looked like someone who had let something unclench. "I set this up because I thought it would prove a point," Sandra said finally. "What point?" "That people don't actually, that nobody actually," she stopped, started again. "That the world doesn't work the way people pretend it does. That someone like her, in her situation, ends up alone. That that's just how it goes. And the decent thing is to accept that instead of," she gestured vaguely toward the window, "instead of pretending some mechanic from the East Side is going to walk in and treat her like she's normal." The word landed wrong even as she said it. She heard it. Denise heard it too. "Like she's normal," Denise repeated. Sandra's mouth pressed into a thin line. "You know what I meant." "Yeah," Denise said. "I know what you meant." She looked at Sandra for a long moment. "I think that's the problem." She put her hands in her pockets and walked back toward the SUV. Sandra stood on the sidewalk alone, the camera feed still running on the tablet inside the car, the timer still counting. The couple at table 7 still talking. She didn't go back inside the SUV right away. She stood there a little longer than she intended to. Inside, Daniel was asking Victoria about the Hargrove contract. Not because he knew anything about the Hargrove contract specifically. He didn't. He'd never heard of it. But because she'd mentioned the board member by the same name, and he was curious about the connection. And he asked because asking felt more respectful than filling in the blanks himself. Victoria told him. The Hargrove Group was a healthcare network, 14 hospitals across 3 states, and they had been looking for a patient navigation software system for almost 2 years. The contract was worth, she paused, considering whether to say the number, and then said it, because being coy about it seemed worse than saying it plainly. $42 million over 5 years. That's a significant number, Daniel said, without flinching, without the particular male recalibration that sometimes happened when a woman said a number like that in casual conversation. It keeps the lights on, Victoria said. And then, because the understatement was absurd, it keeps approximately 400 sets of lights on. And someone was competing for it? Several people. But the one who took it personally was the wife of a competing firm's president. She said it matter-of-factly, not dramatically, the way you describe weather. We don't know each other well. We met once. I find her unsettling. Why unsettling? Victoria considered. Because she smiles like she's keeping a secret. Daniel turned his coffee cup slowly between his palms.
Do you think that's relevant to tonight?
It was a sharp question. Victoria looked at him. Really looked. The assessing look. The one that read rooms and read people. And said, "What makes you ask that?" "Because you've checked the door twice in the last 20 minutes, Daniel said. Not nervously. Strategically. Like you're tracking something. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Daniel waited. "There's a woman," Victoria said slowly, "that I don't fully trust. And Rachel told me that my date tonight had been arranged through a third party. And I've been—" She stopped. "Occupational hazard. I run a company. I'm always doing threat assessments." "Even on dates?" "Especially on dates." She looked at him directly. "I'm sorry. That's a very unromantic thing to admit." "It's honest," Daniel said. "I don't think honest is unromantic. Most people would rather be flattered than told the truth." "I spent 2 years telling myself flattering stories after my marriage ended," Daniel said. "None of them helped. The true version was harder, but it got me somewhere. I'd rather have the true version." Victoria was quiet in the particular way she was quiet when something had reached her. "You ask good questions," she said. "I ask obvious questions," Daniel said. "Most people just don't bother." "That amounts to the same thing," she said. He smiled at that. It was a good smile. Not performed, not deployed, just the natural result of something landing right. Victoria had become, over the past 2 years, very skilled at distinguishing between the two. Men smiled at her performatively all the time. The accessibility advocate at her company's last gala. The financial journalist who'd interviewed her, the second of her 7 post-accident dinner dates, who had smiled with the relentless enthusiasm of a man who had decided in advance that this was going to be a great evening, regardless of whether it actually was. Daniel's smile came after something, not before it. It was a response, not a strategy. She noticed. The decaf arrived. Daniel wrapped his hands around his mug, even though it wasn't cold. Victoria suspected that was a habit. Something to do with his hands, some physical grounding. She recognized the behavior. She had her own version of it. The way she rested her palm flat against the table when a meeting was going badly, feeling the surface, the solidity. "Tell me about a bad day at the shop," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "Why a bad one?" "Because anyone can tell you about a good day. The bad days are where the character is." He thought about it. Actually thought, the way she was beginning to understand he did everything. Completely, without performance. "About 3 years ago," he said. "March, I think. I've had Lily for the weekend, and I brought her into the shop on Saturday because I didn't have anyone to watch her. She was 4. She has a lot of energy, let's say that. I got that impression from the sports commentary." "Right, so imagine that at 4. He smiled briefly. "I had a customer's car. It was a restoration project, a 1968 Mustang. This guy's whole life, basically. He'd been saving up for this for years. And I had Lily set up in the corner with coloring books and snacks, and I thought, great, this is fine. Victoria said nothing. She could already see where this was going, and she found that the anticipation of it was something warm. I went to get a part from the storage room. I was gone maybe 8 minutes. 8 minutes. He held up both hands.
I came back out and she had found a can of bright orange spray paint, and she had painted a very detailed, very enthusiastic mural on the passenger door of the 1968 Mustang.
No, Victoria said, a sunset. She told me it was a sunset. I told her that sunsets don't typically include what appeared to be a large cat. What did the cat look like? In retrospect, I think it might have been a lion. She said it was a happy lion. Daniel's voice had the tone of a man who has processed this story so thoroughly that the pure comedy of it has survived intact. The owner called at 6 that evening. I had spent 3 hours trying to figure out if the paint had set. It had set. I picked up the phone and I told him. I told him exactly what happened. I told him my 4-year-old daughter had decorated his Mustang with a lion at sunset. What did he say? Daniel laughed, a real one, from the chest. He asked if she was okay. Victoria stopped.
That was his first question? She said.
His first question was, is the little girl okay? Did she get into any chemicals? I said she was fine. She was completely fine. She was home, asleep. And he was quiet for a second, and then he said, well, I've always wanted a custom paint job.
He kept the lion?
He did not keep the lion. I repainted the panel. But I gave him a full paint job at cost, and he has been my most loyal customer for 3 years. And last Christmas, he brought Lily a stuffed lion with a card that said, "The original artist." Victoria sat with that for a moment. "That's not a bad day," she said. "That's a bad day that became something better." "All the best ones are," Daniel said. He wasn't being philosophical for the sake of it. He wasn't that kind of man, the kind who delivered wisdom like he was reading from a placard.
He said it the way he said everything, like it was just something he'd noticed, and the noticing had cost him something, and the cost had been worth it.
Victoria picked up her decaf, set it down without drinking. "Can I tell you something that I don't normally tell people?" she said. "You can tell me anything you want." "The 2 years since the accident," she began. She stopped, organized the sentence differently. "I've built the company past what it was before. I've won things I wasn't expected to win. I've gotten up early every morning, and I've made the calls and run the meetings and kept everything going." She paused. "And I've done all of it right. I've done it the right way. I'm not saying this because I need the credit. I'm saying it because it's factually true." "I believe you," Daniel said. "But here's the thing about doing it right," she said. "When you do it right, no one worries about you. When you're thriving, people assume you're fine. And I have been. Fine.
I have been fine." She looked at her hands on the table. "But there are mornings when I sit in my apartment before Rachel arrives and before the first call comes in, and it's so quiet. And I think about how much of my life is managed, scheduled, controlled." She looked up. "I don't know how to turn that off. I don't know how to just be in a room without running the room." She said it plainly, without asking for anything from it, without performing vulnerability. It was just information. It was just the true thing. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. "You turned it off tonight," he said. She looked at him. "Not completely," he said. "You still tracked the door. You still knew exactly which board member you outmaneuvered and how. But that part," he gestured between them, "you let that be real." "I don't know that I chose to." "Maybe you didn't have to choose," he said. "Maybe it just happened." Victoria was quiet. She looked at the daisies, which had been sitting beside her water glass since the beginning of the evening, slightly wilting now, still yellow. "You know," she said, "when you walked in with those flowers, I was prepared to be patronized by them." "By flowers?" "By the gesture, the whole—" She waved her hand. "The flowers, the nice shirt, the effort. I've had men make the effort in a way that made me feel like a charity project, like they were being very brave for having dinner with me." "That's exhausting," Daniel said. "It is," she said. "But you walked in and said they looked like they wanted to be cut." She paused. "That was the least patronizing thing anyone had said to me on a date in my entire adult life." "I also said I talked to my truck," he said, which was the second least patronizing. "I'm on a roll," she laughed. Properly this time. Not the small surface fracture of earlier. A real laugh, with sound, with the slight throw of her head, with a kind of involuntary pleasure that you can't manufacture and can't control. Daniel heard it and said nothing. He just let it be there, in the space between them, real and unmanaged. Denise was back in the SUV. She'd tried to say something more to Sandra outside, and Sandra had shut it down with the particular finality of a woman who had decided she was done being read tonight. And Denise had respected that, because that was what you did after 11 years of friendship. You picked your moments. Bree had fallen mostly asleep against the window. Denise picked up the tablet, watched the screen for a moment. They were leaning toward each other slightly now. Not dramatically, not in the movie way, but in the small physical grammar of two people whose bodies had decided they were safe in proximity. Victoria was gesturing with one hand as she talked. Daniel was nodding in the way of someone genuinely following, not just waiting to respond. Denise set the tablet down. "Sandra?" she said. Sandra was staring straight out the windshield. "What?" "I think we should go." Sandra turned to look at her. "Not because he stayed," Denise said carefully, "but because I think—" She chose her words. "I think staying here any longer is going to make us feel worse, not better. And I think you know that." Sandra looked at the cafe, at the window, at the two people on the other side of the glass who were entirely unaware of the SUV, the camera, the bet, the timer that was now at 1 hour and 41 minutes. "The camera's still in there," Sandra said. "I'll get it tomorrow," Denise said. "I'll go in for coffee and I'll get it." "Bree put 100 on him leaving," Sandra said. "She's going to want—" "Bree's asleep," Denise said. "And Bree's $100 is the least of what we need to talk about." "But not tonight." Sandra said nothing for a long moment. Then quietly she said, "I didn't think he would stay." "I know," Denise said. "I really didn't think—" She stopped, pressed her lips together. "I ran the whole thing in my head, and I couldn't imagine a guy like that. I didn't think he would just sit down and—" She gestured helplessly toward the cafe. "Just be a person." Denise didn't say the obvious thing. She wasn't that kind of friend. "Start the car," Sandra said. Denise started the car. The SUV pulled away from the curb slowly, and for a moment, just a moment, Sandra looked back at the cafe window one more time, at the table where two people were still talking in the comfortable, unhurried way of people who have forgotten about time. Then she faced forward. The car turned the corner, and across the street, in a warm cafe on Meridian Street, at a table with slightly wilted daisies and 2 empty coffee cups, Daniel Hayes and Victoria Hale kept talking, because neither of them was ready to stop. And for the first time in a long time, neither of them was running the calculation of whether that was wise. It was enough just to be there. It was more than enough. The cafe was thinning out now, the dinner crowd giving way to the quieter evening regulars. couples lingering over dessert, a few solo people with laptops who had established their territories early and intended to hold them. The waiter had cleared their cups twice, each time asking if they needed anything else, with the practiced patience of someone who could see they weren't leaving, and had decided to let them stay anyway. Daniel had his phone out, not to scroll, but turned sideways between them, showing Victoria a photo. Lily again, this time at the shop. The milk crate. The crayon drawing she was holding up toward the camera with both hands, and the expression of someone presenting a masterwork. "That's her signature expression," Daniel said. "The, I made this, and I need you to understand that it is important," face. "It's extremely effective," Victoria said. "She uses it on me approximately 14 times a day." "Does it work every time?" "Every single time." He took the phone back, put it away. "She asked me this morning what my date would be like." Victoria looked at him. "What did you tell her?" "I told her I didn't know. I told her that dates were mostly a mystery, and you just had to go find out." He paused. "She told me that mysteries were her favorite, and I should tell her everything when I got home." "Everything?" Victoria said. "She's 7. Everything means, did you have good food, and did you make a friend?" Victoria looked at him, steadily, openly, with none of the managed distance she'd walked in with 3 hours ago. "Tell her yes to both," she said. Daniel looked at her for a moment. Really looked. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I will." And the words sat there between them, not heavy, not dramatic, just honest and unhurried, and exactly the right size for the moment it occupied. They stayed until the cafe was nearly empty. It wasn't something either of them planned or decided. It was just the natural result of a conversation that kept finding new rooms to move into, so that every time one of them might have reached for a coat or checked a watch, something else opened up, and they walked through it instead. The waiter, whose name they had learned was Terrence, and who had been working doubles all week to cover a sick coworker, had stopped by one final time with a check, unprompted, and said with the particular diplomacy of someone who needed to close down, "Whenever you're ready, absolutely no rush," which was cafe code for, "There is a small amount of rush." Daniel had reached for the check without ceremony. Victoria had let him. Not because she couldn't afford it, she could have bought the cafe, but because she'd watched his hand move toward it and understood, without it being said, that this wasn't about money, and it wasn't about gender, and it wasn't about any of the things those gestures usually got tangled up in. It was just that he wanted to, and she decided that was enough of a reason. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you for staying," he said. "I know you had an exit plan." She looked at him. "What makes you say that?" "You had your phone set to do something at 8:15. I watched you check it, see whatever didn't come through, and put it back down." He signed the receipt. "I've been on enough awkward dates to recognize an emergency contact setup." Victoria was quiet for a beat. Rachel was supposed to call with a work crisis. What was the code word? She considered whether to tell him, decided the honesty of the evening had earned it. "Pivot." "Pivot," he repeated. "It works in any context. I could have been talking about quarterly strategy and just said it out loud." "Smooth." "I've used it twice before." "And tonight?" "Tonight," she said, "I didn't send it." He folded the receipt and put it in his jacket pocket, not discarding it, keeping it, which she noticed without commenting on. And he looked at her with that steady, unbothered attention that had been unsettling her pleasantly all evening. "I'm glad you didn't," he said. "So am I," she said, and she meant it without caveat, without the internal footnote she usually applied to admissions like that. The asterisk that said, "But don't read too much into this," or "This doesn't mean anything yet." She just meant it, clean and complete. They moved toward the exit together. The air outside was the cool side of mild, that specific March evening temperature that couldn't make up its mind. Warm enough to be outside, but just sharp enough to remind you that winter hadn't fully released its claim. Victoria had her blazer, and Daniel held the door and then moved with her through it. And neither of them commented on the logistics of it, which was the most natural thing anyone had done in Victoria's proximity in longer than she wanted to calculate. Her car was parked around the side of the building. His truck, Charlene presumably, was apparently 2 blocks up on a meter. They stopped on the sidewalk outside the cafe. This was the part of the evening that Victoria had rehearsed, in the abstract, in the way you rehearse things you dread. The ending of it. The goodbye that was either the first goodbye or the last goodbye, and the not knowing in advance which one it was. In her post-accident life, every goodbye at the end of an evening had been the last one. Sometimes she'd known it in real time. She'd watched the calculation happen in a man's face, the weighing of inconvenience against attraction, and she'd known before she was back in her apartment that the follow-up text wasn't coming. She had gotten good at bracing for that, good at the internal quiet, the controlled expectation. Standing on the sidewalk outside Calla & Company on Meridian Street at nearly 10 at night, Victoria found she could not locate the bracing. She looked for it, the familiar mechanism, the armor sliding back into place. And it wasn't there. That alarmed her more than she wanted to admit. "My car is around the corner," she said, because something needed to be said. "I'll walk with you," Daniel said. No preamble, no asking, just the natural assumption of a man who was not yet done with the company and saw no reason to pretend otherwise. They moved around the corner. The street was quieter here, fewer people, the low sound of distant traffic. Her car, a dark gray sedan, driver's side door modified, was parked in the accessible spot nearest the corner. They stopped beside it. The moment had arrived, the way moments do, whether you're ready or not, with the slight pressure of the city night around it and everything in the past 3 hours settling into the specific gravity of right now. "I want to see you again," Daniel said. He said it the way he said everything, directly, without decoration, without the performance of casual that men sometimes use to say important things, as though they didn't mean them. He just said it, as a fact he'd arrived at and chose to share. Victoria looked at him. "I don't do things slowly," she said. "I should warn you about that. I don't ease into things. Once I decide something, I move fast, and that has been the source of several significant problems in my life." "Okay," he said. "I'm also difficult," she said. "Your brother-in-law was not wrong." "I know," he said. "You've been difficult all evening." She raised an eyebrow. "You've been difficult in the way that means you don't accept a surface answer. You push back on things that deserve pushback. And you said 4 things tonight that made me think harder than I have in months." He put his hands in his pockets. "If that's what difficult means, then I'll take it." "Most people don't take it for very long," she said. "I'm not most people," he said. Simply, not as a boast, just as a fact about himself that he'd verified and was reporting accurately. Victoria looked at him for a long moment. Then she took out her phone. "Give me your number," she said. He told it to her. She put it in. She handed him her phone, and he put himself in her contacts under Daniel. No last name, no emoji, just Daniel, and handed it back. "I'll call you," she said. "I know you will," he said. She looked at him one more time. That full, assessing look, the one that read rooms and people and situations. And this time what it found was a man standing on a sidewalk at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday night, with his hands in his pockets and gas station daisy pollen probably on his jacket, and nothing to prove to anyone, including her.
She got in her car. He stood there until she'd pulled out, and she saw him in the rearview mirror, still on the sidewalk, watching the car go. Not with the forced casualness of a man trying not to seem too invested. Just watching, steady, the way he did everything. She turned the corner. She called Rachel.
Rachel picked up on the first ring, which meant she had been waiting with her phone in her hand, which Victoria chose not to comment on.
"Well," Rachel said.
"You owe me an apology," Victoria said.
"For setting you up? For not doing it sooner." A beat. "Don't make that weird. Just take the win." She could hear Rachel's smile through the phone. "Details," Rachel said. "All of them." "Tomorrow," Victoria said. "Victoria, tomorrow, Rachel." But her voice had something in it that hadn't been there this morning. Something lighter. Something that had been let out from where it had been stored. And Rachel, who had worked for Victoria for 3 years and knew her frequencies precisely, heard it immediately, and wisely said nothing else except good night.
Victoria drove home through the quiet streets, and the city passed around her like it always did. And she felt different in a way that she was not yet willing to fully name, because naming it made it real, and real things could break. But she felt it, present and undeniable. The particular sensation of a door that had been closed for 2 years having opened tonight. Not because anyone forced it, but because someone had knocked with the right amount of patience and the right amount of honesty, and she had, finally, opened it herself. Daniel walked back to his truck. Charlene, for the record, started on the first try. He sat in the parking spot for a moment without pulling out, his phone in his hand, Marcus's name already visible in his recent contacts. He called. Marcus picked up, sounding guilty immediately, which meant he'd been tracking time and knew that Daniel had been gone too long for a bad date, and was trying to calculate whether this was anger or something else. "Before you say anything," Marcus said.
"You set me up," Daniel said.
"I set you up with a woman who is, by all objective measures—"
"You set me up without telling me anything real," Daniel said. "You said she was a businesswoman. You didn't say she was—" "I know, because you would have psyched yourself out." Daniel sat with that. "Would you have gone if I told you she was a CEO?" Marcus asked. "I don't know." "Yes, you do." The honest answer was that Daniel didn't know for certain, but the uncertain version of that answer leaned toward no. He would have built a story about it. He would have told himself some version of, "What's the point?" and "What would she want with me?" and convinced himself before he got to the door that the whole thing was an exercise in somebody else's pity. He had done that before. He'd done it specifically and repeatedly in the 2 years since his divorce. The quiet, ongoing work of talking himself out of things before they could talk themselves out of him first. "Yeah," he said. "I do." "So," Marcus said, "how was she?" Daniel looked through Charlene's windshield at the quiet street, the cafe on the corner with its lights still on, the small, ordinary geography of an evening that had turned out to be something else. "She's remarkable," he said. He didn't qualify it. He didn't soften it with humor or bury it in casualness. He just said it, the true thing, out loud to another person. Marcus was quiet for exactly 1 second and then said in a completely different voice, the voice under all the joking, "Yeah?" "Yeah," Daniel said. "You're going to see her again?" "She's going to call me." "You know that for sure?" "Yeah," Daniel said. "I know that for sure." And he did. He couldn't have explained the mechanism of the knowing. It wasn't logic. It wasn't wishful thinking. It was just the particular clarity that sometimes arrived at the end of an evening when everything that happened in it had been real and both people involved had known it. He knew she would call the way he knew when an engine was running right. Not by reading a diagnostic, but by the sound of it. All right, Marcus said, and there was something in his voice that sounded very much like relief. Don't get emotional, Daniel said. I'm not getting emotional. You absolutely are. I'm going to go, Marcus said. Tell Sheila her husband did one thing right. I'll tell her you said so. They hung up. Daniel pulled out of the parking spot and drove home through streets that looked the same as they always did, and felt, for reasons he couldn't fully account for, slightly different than they had 3 hours ago. Lily was asleep. His sister-in-law, Patrice, Marcus's younger sister, the babysitter by default and genuine preference, was on the couch with a magazine when Daniel got in, and she looked up at him and apparently saw something in his face because she immediately said, "Oh," in the specific tone of someone who was prepared for either outcome and was acknowledging which one had arrived. "Don't," Daniel said. "I didn't say anything," Patrice said. "You said, 'oh,' in a very loud way." "I said, 'oh,' in a completely neutral way." It was not neutral. "How was she?" Patrice asked. Daniel hung up his jacket, checked the time. "It's late. You should get home." "Daniel." He turned around. Patrice was looking at him with the uncomplicated affection of someone who had been in his corner without drama or agenda for years, through the marriage and through the divorce and through the particular quiet that had settled over his life after. And her expression right now was just open, waiting. "She's remarkable," he said. Same word he'd used with Marcus. He didn't have a better one. Patrice pressed her lips together in the way of a woman trying not to smile too extensively, and failing. "Go home," Daniel said. "I'm going," she said. She picked up her bag and kissed him briefly on the cheek on her way to the door. Something she'd never done before, and which he understood to be its own kind of punctuation. And then she was gone. Daniel checked on Lily. She was asleep in the way only children slept, completely surrendered, one arm flung over the edge of the mattress, her hair across her face. He straightened her blanket and stood there for a moment in the doorway the way he always did. The nightly ritual of just looking at her. This person he'd made. This 7-year-old with the gap-toothed grin and the sports commentary, and the absolute certainty that every piece of art she created deserved to be seen. He thought about what Victoria had said, looking at Lily's photo in the cafe. She's beautiful. No qualifier. No softness applied because she was in front of a father who loved his daughter. Just the direct, honest recognition that something was worth seeing. He thought about the way Victoria laughed. The first small crack of it, and then later, the real thing. He thought about the way she'd said, "Tell her yes" to both, and the specific weight of those 4 words. He turned off the hall light and went to bed. He did not eat cereal alone. The video went live at 11:17 the following morning. Sandra had not been the one to post it. That was the thing she hadn't accounted for. The variable she'd failed to include in a plan that she'd believed was controlled at every point. Because she had told Bree about the camera, and Bree, who had fallen asleep in the back seat and been only partially informed about the events of the evening, had retrieved the device the following morning before Denise could, and she had watched the footage on her laptop over coffee, and she had posted it to her account with the caption, "Set up a mechanic on a blind date with a disabled CEO to see if he'd stay. Watch what happens." It had 40,000 views by noon. It had 200,000 by 2 o'clock. Bree had expected it to go one specific direction. She had expected the comments section to fill with a particular brand of cruelty that lived online. The mocking, the reduction, the shared entertainment of watching someone fail a test they didn't know they were taking. She had expected to be forwarding it to Sandra with laughing emojis by mid-afternoon. That was not what happened. The comments came in fast and they came in hard, and they were not directed at Daniel. They were not directed at Victoria. They were directed,
with increasing unanimity and heat at the caption, at the word disabled, used as a punchline setup, at the phrase to see if he'd stay, and what it implied about the person it was implied about. She's a human being, not a social experiment. So you filmed a private date without their knowledge to mock them? That's not funny, that's harassment. Did you just use a wheelchair user as bait for content? The only person who failed any test here is the one who made this video. Bree had not expected that. She had expected the internet to be on her side, because, in her experience, the internet was usually on the side of the joke, and she had believed this was a joke. She had genuinely, without irony, believed this was funny. A light, harmless, curious little social test between people who didn't know they were being watched. By 3 o'clock, the comment count was over 14,000, and the ratio had turned, which was the internet's specific grammar for, "We have judged this and found you wanting." And Bree was sitting at her laptop with the particular expression of someone who has pulled a thread and watched more come with it than they expected. She called Sandra. Sandra did not answer. She called Denise. Denise picked up on the third ring. "I saw," Denise said, before Bree could speak. "It wasn't supposed to," Bree started. "I know what it was supposed to do," Denise said. "I was there. I thought it would be funny." Denise was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful and even. "Bree, you filmed a woman in a wheelchair on a first date, without her knowledge, as part of a bet about whether a man would leave when he saw her chair. And then you posted it." She paused. "What part of that did you think was funny?" Bree said nothing. "Take it down," Denise said.
"It has 300,000 views now,"
Bree said, which was the wrong answer, and she knew it the moment she said it. But 300,000 was a number that did something to a person's thinking when they'd never seen it attached to their name before. "Take it down, Bree." The line was quiet. "What do I say?" Bree asked finally. Her voice had changed, smaller now, the confidence drained out of it, the unfamiliar territory of genuine consequence beginning to show in the edges. "That's not a question I can answer for you," Denise said. "But take it down first. Think about the rest after." "Will Sandra? Talk to Sandra yourself. This isn't something I can manage for both of you." And then, not unkindly, but with finality, "I have to go." The call ended. Bree sat in front of her laptop and looked at the view count, which was still climbing, and the comments, which were not slowing, and the name in the caption that she had written with a laughing emoji and which now felt, in the specific cold light of consequence, like something very different from what she'd intended. She reached for the delete button. She stopped. 340,000 views. Her finger hovered. Victoria found out from Rachel. Rachel, who monitored mentions of the company's name and any connected public profiles as part of her job, had gotten an alert mid-morning about something trending, had clicked through, and had spent 40 seconds watching a shaky cafe camera feed before she understood what she was seeing. She had walked into Victoria's office, put her phone on the desk, and said, "There's something you need to see, and I want you to know before I show you that I am so sorry and also furious." Victoria had watched it. She watched it once, all the way through, the full 1 hour and 49 minutes compressed into a 4-minute highlight clip that Bree had edited for maximum comedic effect. The expectant faces in the SUV, the counter going up, Daniel walking in with his flowers, the caption, "He doesn't know yet," and then, cut, the two of them still talking an hour in, and Sandra's expression through the car window, and the final frame of the couple at the table leaning slightly toward each other, while the caption changed to, "Guess he didn't mind." Victoria set the phone down. She was quiet for a full 15 seconds. Rachel was watching her with the specific vigilance of a person waiting to understand which kind of quiet this was. "Sandra Myers," Victoria said.
Her name isn't mentioned, but someone in the comments identified the SUV, Rachel said. Of course they did. Victoria turned her chair toward the window. And the camera was in the cafe.
On the Fern, from what people are saying. The Fern, Victoria repeated, quietly, with the tone of a person writing something into long-term memory. What do you want to do? Rachel asked. Victoria was quiet for another moment. She thought about the evening, about daisies and decaf, and the particular quality of Daniel's attention. About the 2 years she had spent building her life back to something whole, carefully, one decision at a time, and the specific indignity of having that reclamation turned into content. But she also thought, and she didn't want to think it, but she did, because she was Victoria Hale and she thought about everything. About what 400,000 strangers on the internet were apparently saying about it. Pull up the comments, she said. Rachel hesitated. Some of them are... Rachel. Rachel pulled up the comments. Victoria read them. Not all of them. There were too many. But she read enough. She read the ones that were angry on her behalf. She read the ones that were moved by something they'd seen in 4 minutes of shaky hidden camera footage. She read the ones that said, "The woman in the wheelchair is clearly accomplished and brilliant, and the setup says everything about the people who made it." She read the one that said simply, "He brought her flowers and stayed for 2 hours and never once made it weird." That's the whole story. She was quiet for a long moment. "Don't do anything yet," she said. "Victoria, I need to make a phone call first." She turned back toward her desk. "Close the door on your way out, please." Rachel closed the door. Victoria picked up her phone, went to her contacts, found the name that had been there since last night. Daniel. Plain. No last name. And looked at it for a moment. She had told him she would call. She had meant, eventually. In a day or two, after the appropriate interval, the casual enough cadence of someone who was interested but not desperate. She looked at the view count still climbing on Rachel's abandoned phone screen. She called. He picked up on the second ring. "Victoria," he said, and the way he said it, not surprised, not performing unsurprise, just her name as if it were a perfectly natural thing to receive, undid something small and precise in her chest. "There's something you need to know," she said. "Okay," he said. "And I need you to know it from me," she said, "before you see it somewhere else." "Tell me," he said. She told him. She said it plainly, without dramatics, with the same directness she brought to every hard conversation, because that was how she'd survived every hard conversation. By naming the thing before the thing could name her. She told him about the camera and the bet and the SUV and the name she was fairly certain was Sandra Myers and the 4-minute video that was approaching 500,000 views and had a comment section that had apparently become a referendum on human decency. She waited. Daniel was quiet for a moment, the specific quiet of a man absorbing information and not filling the space with noise for the sake of filling it. "So the whole thing was set up," he said. "Yes." "And someone was watching the whole time." "Yes." "And you knew something was off," he said. "The door. The assessment." "I suspected," she said. "I didn't know." Another beat. "Are you okay?" he asked. Victoria had prepared on some level for anger, for the retroactive awkwardness of knowing they'd been watched, for the particular male tendency to make his own feelings about the violation the primary subject. She had not, specifically, prepared for that question first. "I'm processing," she said. "That's fair," he said. "Are you safe? Is this the kind of thing that... Are people going to show up at your company?" "No," she said. "It's not that kind of attention. It's..." She paused.
People are angry at the setup, not at us. Okay, he said. Daniel? Yeah. I need you to know that nothing about last night was... She stopped, found the word. Performed, for me. None of it. I know, he said. You know? Yeah, he said. I know. The same way I know when an engine's running right. He paused. You don't have to convince me of that part. Victoria sat at her desk in her office, with the city outside the window doing what the city did, and felt something that had been wound tight in her chest since Rachel had walked through the door with the phone. Something that had been bracing again, the familiar armor returning. Release. I'm going to handle this, she said, on my end. I figured, he said. I may need to make a statement. Do what you need to do.
It might draw attention to
Victoria, he said. Do what you need to do. I'm not fragile. And I'm not going anywhere because someone pointed a camera at us and posted it. She was quiet. You sure about that? She said. Not weakness, just the check. The honest verification. I told Lily last night that I made a friend, he said. She asked if the friend had a name. I said yes. She asked if she was a good person. I said yes. He paused. She told me good people were worth keeping. She's 7, but she's also not wrong. Victoria closed her eyes for one moment. She's remarkable, she said. Yeah, Daniel said. She takes after her dad. And despite everything, the video, the 500,000 views, the camera on the fern, the SUV across the street, the bet, Sandra Myers and her particular brand of quiet cruelty. Victoria Hale laughed. The statement went up at 4:17 in the afternoon from Victoria's personal account, which had 43,000 followers and had previously been used exclusively for industry articles and the occasional company milestone. She had written it herself, refused Rachel's 3 offered edits, and posted it before she could think too carefully about the consequences of saying a true thing in public. It read, Last night I went on a blind date I almost didn't agree to. I found out this morning that the date was filmed without my knowledge or consent, as part of a bet about whether my date would leave once he saw my wheelchair. I'm posting this not because I want sympathy. I don't. But because I want to say clearly, the only thing that happened at that table last night was a genuine conversation between 2 people who showed up honestly. Whatever the people behind that camera were hoping to prove, they proved the opposite. I'm not a test. I'm not a punchline. And I'd like to thank the man who apparently never got that memo, because he didn't need it. Rachel read it over her shoulder as she posted it and said nothing for a moment. Then she said, That's the best thing you've ever written. It's 200 words, Victoria said. The Gettysburg Address was 272, Rachel said. Length is not the point. Victoria closed the app and turned back to the spreadsheet she'd been ignoring all afternoon. Get me the Hargrove prep materials. I want to go through the Q4 projections before tomorrow. Victoria? Rachel? You just posted something that's going to be seen by a lot of people. I know that. Don't you want to, I don't know, sit with it for a minute? Victoria looked at her. I sat with it for 4 hours. I posted it. Now I want the Hargrove materials. Rachel got her the Hargrove materials. But she also, on her way back to her own desk, checked Victoria's account on her phone and watched the notification counter move in a way she had never seen it move before, and said nothing about it because Victoria had asked for the Hargrove materials, and that was what she was going to focus on. The view count on Bree's video hit 700,000 before she took it down. She posted a 15-second apology video in its place, apologizing to anyone who was offended which was the grammatical structure of a person who had not yet fully understood the difference between offense and harm, but was moving in that general direction. And then she closed her laptop and sat on her couch and stared at her wall for a while. Sandra saw the original video at 1:15, 3 hours after it went live, when a name she recognized showed up in her texts.
It was someone from her husband's office. Not a friend, more of a mutual. The kind of connection that existed in the specific social geography of professional spouses. And the text said, "Is this you in the SUV?" Sandra clicked the link. She watched the 4 minutes. She put her phone face down on the kitchen counter and stood there with her hands flat against the surface, feeling the cold of the stone, and thought about the specific sequence of decisions that had led from a charity event 14 months ago to 700,000 people watching her sit in a parked car with a tablet. Her husband was at work. The house was quiet. She picked the phone back up and called Denise. Denise answered immediately. "I know," Denise said. "They identify the SUV," Sandra said. "I know." "The comments." "Sandra, I know." "I didn't think—" Sandra stopped. Started differently. "I didn't post it." "But you planned it," Denise said. Not hard, not accusatory, just accurate, in the way that Denise was sometimes accurate when she was done being gentle about something. "Denise, you planned it, Sandra. You placed a bet. You put the camera in the cafe. You found Daniel, and you found Victoria, and you set the thing in motion." A beat. "Bree posted a video, but this was yours." The quiet on Sandra's end of the line had the texture of a person standing in a room where the furniture has been rearranged and they're trying to remember where to put their hands. "What do I do?" Sandra asked. "I think you already know," Denise said. Sandra stared at the kitchen counter, at the phone, at her own reflection, vague and flat in the darkened screen of it. "Her company's number is public," Denise said. "Ask for her assistant, the woman who set up the date, Rachel, I think. Tell her who you are. Ask if Victoria will speak with you." A pause. "If she won't, that's the answer. If she will, then you figure out what honest sounds like and you say it."
"And if she destroys me?"
Sandra asked. "Then you earned it," Denise said. Not cruelly, just with the flatness of someone who had arrived at the end of softening things. Sandra said nothing. "I still love you," Denise said. "That's not the question. The question is whether you love yourself enough to do the hard thing here instead of the easy thing." "What's the easy thing?" "Waiting for it to blow over," Denise said. "Telling yourself Bree started it. Telling yourself it was harmless. Going back to brunch next Saturday like nothing happened." Sandra closed her eyes. "Call her, Sandra," Denise said. "Not for her. For you." Victoria's phone rang at 5:45. Rachel had already left. The office was quiet in the way it went quiet late in the day. That particular stillness that came when the open-plan floor emptied, and it was just Victoria and the city outside and the soft hum of the building systems. Rachel had screened the call first. She'd set up a protocol for the day, given the circumstances, and sent a text through to Victoria's cell. "There's a woman on the main line who says she's Sandra Myers. She says she wants to speak with you directly. She says she won't explain to me, only to you. Your call." Victoria read the text. She sat with it for the length of time it took to decide what kind of person she wanted to be in this particular moment. Not reflexively, not from ego, but from genuine consideration. Because she had a choice. She could decline. She could have Rachel send a message back that said, "Ms. Hale is unavailable." And that would be accurate and defensible, and the video was already down, and her statement was already out, and she didn't owe Sandra Myers a single thing. She knew that. She also knew herself. She picked up the office line. "This is Victoria Hale," she said. Silence on the other end. Then, "This is Sandra." A pause. "Myers."
I know who you are, Victoria said.
I assumed Sandra's voice was not what Victoria had expected. She'd expected the armor, the managed tone of a woman who had decided in advance how this conversation was going to go. She'd expected the particular careful language of someone whose husband had probably already called a lawyer just in case. Sandra's voice didn't have any of that. It sounded like the voice of someone who had been sitting alone in a quiet house for 4 hours and had arrived somewhere she hadn't anticipated. "I want to apologize," Sandra said. "All right," Victoria said. "I planned the whole thing. Bree posting the video wasn't. I didn't plan that part. But everything else?" A pause. "I set it up. I found your date, I placed the bet, I put the camera in the cafe." She stopped. "I told myself it was a social experiment. I told myself it was a curiosity that I just wanted to see." "What did you want to see?" Victoria said. Her voice was even. She was listening the way she listened to a pitch, completely without interruption, reading everything underneath the words for the thing that was actually being said. "I wanted to see him leave," Sandra said quietly. She stopped again. "I wanted the world to confirm something I'd been telling myself, that it was too complicated, that people didn't, that someone in your situation." She stopped, tried differently. "I told myself I wanted to prove a point about human nature, but I think the truth is I wanted to prove that you couldn't. That I couldn't have what you assumed I wanted," Victoria said. A long silence. "Yes," Sandra said. "I think that's right." Victoria turned her chair toward the window. The city was doing what it did at 6 in the evening. The light changing, the traffic thickening, the particular gold of late afternoon beginning its shift toward something darker. "Why?" Victoria said.
I think
Sandra's voice shifted, took on the fragile quality of someone moving toward an admission they've been circling for hours. "I think because if you could have it, then my reasons for assuming you couldn't were wrong. And if those reasons were wrong about you, then I had to think about what else they were wrong about." Victoria was quiet. "That's honest," she said finally. "I don't think it's enough," Sandra said. "No," Victoria said. "It's not. But it's a starting place." "I don't expect you to forgive me," Sandra said. "I'm not calling for forgiveness. I'm calling because Denise told me to do the hard thing. And this was the hard thing, and I think you deserved to hear it directly. From me, not through a lawyer or a spokesperson or an email that someone else drafted." "Denise was right," Victoria said. A beat. "She usually is," Sandra said, and something in her voice cracked slightly on the words, barely, just at the edge.
Victoria looked at the city outside.
"Ms. Myers," she said, "I want to say something to you, and I want you to hear it as clearly as possible." "Okay," Sandra said. "What you did was cruel," Victoria said. "Not thoughtless, not careless. Cruel. You used me as a prop in a bet about my own worth. You put a camera on me during a private moment, and you had people watching to see if the mechanic would run from the woman in the wheelchair because the answer you were hoping for was yes." She paused. "I have spent 2 years working to make sure that no one gets to reduce me to that chair. I have fought for that in boardrooms and earnings calls and hospital corridors and every single morning when it would have been easier not to fight. And you undid none of it. You couldn't. But you tried." Sandra said nothing. She was listening. "That's what the apology is for," Victoria said.
Not the video, not the public attention. That. Yes, Sandra said quietly. That's what I'm sorry for.
The line held a long silence, not uncomfortable, but heavy in the specific way of things that have been named and must now be carried. I'm not going to pursue anything legally, Victoria said. I've decided that. That's not absolution. It's a choice I'm making for my own reasons, not yours. I understand, Sandra said. I'd like you to donate, Victoria said. There's an organization, the Reeve Foundation, you can find it easily, that does meaningful work in exactly the area that apparently requires further education in certain circles. The amount is between you and your conscience. I'll do that, Sandra said. Today. Good, Victoria said. Another silence. He was good to you? Sandra asked. Quietly, almost as if she hadn't meant to say it. Victoria looked at the city. Yes, she said. He was good to me. I'm glad, Sandra said. And the strange thing, the thing Victoria would sit with later, turning it over, was that it sounded true. She ended the call. She sat in the quiet office for a while without reaching for anything, without a spreadsheet or a call or a next item on the list. She just sat with the specific weight of the day, the video, the statement, the 500,000 strangers, the phone call, and let it be the size it was without trying to manage it smaller. Her phone buzzed. Daniel, saw your statement. You okay? She looked at the text. She thought about the last time someone had asked her that and meant it as an actual question rather than a rhetorical kindness. She typed back, "Getting there. You?" His response came in under 30 seconds. "Lily wants to know if your friend from Wednesday is coming to her art show." Victoria stared at the screen. She's having an art show? She's exhibiting one drawing on the refrigerator and requiring formal attendance. Dress code optional. Victoria's mouth moved before she could stop it. When? Saturday, 2 o'clock. The venue is our kitchen. I'll be there, she typed. She sent it. She put the phone down. She picked it back up. Also, she typed, tell Lily the artist is very talented. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. She says she already knows. She also says the piece is called 2 Lions in the Sun and is not for sale. Victoria set the phone on her desk and looked at it for a moment. Then she laughed, quietly, alone in her office, at a text message on a Thursday evening, with the particular ease of someone who has gotten through a very hard day and arrived, against expectations, at something good on the other side of it. Rachel came back in without knocking, which was the specific privilege she had been granted in years of working for a woman who appreciated efficiency over ceremony. Your statement has 2 million impressions, she said, by way of greeting. I don't need to know that, Victoria said. People are sharing it everywhere. Rachel sat down in the chair across the desk, which she only did when she had something to say that wasn't about work. There's a news outlet that wants a comment. No. Victoria, no. I said what I had to say. I said it myself, in my own words, to my own audience. I'm not performing it for a camera. Rachel nodded. She'd expected that answer, and she agreed with it. How are you, actually? Rachel asked. You asked me that twice in one day, and I'm going to start thinking something's wrong. Something was wrong, Rachel said. Someone put a camera on you without your permission on a date that I arranged. If you want to be furious at me, I don't, Victoria said. You couldn't have known. And for the record, she looked at Rachel directly. The date was good. Rachel's professional composure held for exactly 3 seconds. I know, she said. I could tell. From your voice last night when you called. I could tell. Don't make it weird, Victoria said. I'm making it nothing, Rachel said. I'm just...
She pressed her lips together. "I'm really glad, Victoria." "Yes," Victoria said, and the word came out simply, with none of the caveats she usually applied to things that made her feel exposed. "So am I." Rachel stood up, smoothed her jacket, returned to the professional geometry she understood. "Go home," she said. "The Hargrove prep will still be here tomorrow. It's not going anywhere." "It's not, but the deadline is in 11 days," Rachel said. "You have time. Go home." Victoria looked at the stack of materials on her desk, at the city outside, now fully dark, the lights of it replacing the daylight with their own version of the same energy, restless and continuous. "Fine," she said. She reached for her jacket. In a two-bay shop on Culver Road, the lights were off. Daniel had closed up at 5:30, which was early for him. Normally, he'd find something to stay for. A vehicle that needed one more look, paperwork that had been waiting. The particular quiet of the shop after hours that was different from the quiet of the house, less loaded, easier to breathe in. He'd been staying late for years. It was one of the things his ex-wife had mentioned, reasonably and not unkindly, toward the end. Tonight he'd locked up at 5:30 and driven straight home and gotten Lily from Patrice's house, 2 doors down. And they'd made dinner together. Pasta, Lily's choice, always Lily's choice. And she had narrated the entire process of boiling water as though it were the final round of a competition, and he had let her, and the house had been full of her voice the way he liked it best. After dinner, she'd shown him the drawing. It was on a large piece of construction paper, yellow-orange across the top half, 2 shapes in the middle that were identifiable as lions, primarily through context and effort. The lions were side by side. One of them had what appeared to be a crown. "Which one has the crown?" Daniel asked. "The lady lion," Lily said, with the authority of someone who had thought about this. "Why does the lady lion have the crown?" "Because she's the boss," Lily said, "and bosses get crowns. That's the rule." "Who made that rule?" "I did," Lily said. "Just now." He looked at the drawing. "It's your best one," he said. "I know," she said, satisfied. She'd taped it to the refrigerator herself, with 4 pieces of tape at the corners, and stood back and assessed it with her hands on her hips. The posture of an artist, confirming that the installation was correct. "Dad," she said. "Yeah, Bug? Is your friend coming Saturday?" "I asked her," he said. "What did she say?" "She said yes." Lily turned to look at him with the full, uncomplicated scrutiny of a 7-year-old who has not yet learned to be subtle. "Is she nice?" Lily asked. "She's remarkable," Daniel said. Lily considered this word, turned it over. "Is that the same as nice?" "It's better," he said. Lily looked at the drawing on the refrigerator, at the 2 lions in the sun, side by side, one of them wearing a crown. "Okay," she said, in the tone of someone who has received satisfactory information and is ready to proceed. "I'm going to need you to make sure the kitchen is clean by 2 o'clock." "Yes, ma'am," Daniel said. "And we should have something to eat. For the guests." "There's one guest." "Guests," Lily said firmly. "It's an art show." "I'll get cookies," Daniel said. "The good ones," she said. "The good ones," he agreed. She turned back to the refrigerator, straightened the drawing 1 millimeter. "Dad," she said again. "Yeah?" "I'm glad you went." He looked at her. This 7-year-old person with paint perpetually somewhere on her, and the front tooth gap, and the unwavering certainty that the things she made deserved to be seen by anyone willing to look. "Me too, Bug," he said. "Me too." Saturday arrived the way good days sometimes do, quietly, without announcement. The kind of morning that didn't announce itself as significant until you were already in the middle of it and realized that something was different about the light. Daniel had been up since 6:30. He'd cleaned the kitchen by 8, which was a full 6 hours ahead of Lily's deadline, and then he'd cleaned it again at 10, because Lily had made oatmeal, and the radius of the damage was considerable. He'd run to the bakery on Clement Street for the good cookies, the ones with the thick frosting that Lily had categorized in her personal taxonomy of baked goods as the only kind worth serving at an official event. Lily had been awake since before him.
He'd found her at 6:15, sitting cross-legged on the kitchen floor in front of the refrigerator, studying her drawing with the focused intensity of an artist conducting final pre-show evaluations. "It's good," he told her when he found her there. "I know," she said. "I'm just checking." "What are you checking for?" "If it still looks good when I'm not the one who made it," she said. Sometimes things look good because you made them, and then later they just look like a thing. Daniel had looked at his daughter for a moment, at this 7-year-old who had just articulated something it had taken him 35 years to understand, and said, "Does it still look good?" Lily tilted her head. "Yeah," she said. "I think the lions are right." He'd made her breakfast after that, and they'd moved through the morning the way they moved through all their best mornings, without agenda, without rush. Lily talking at full volume about things that mattered to her, and Daniel listening in the complete, unhurried way that was the thing he was best at, the thing he did better than almost anything else in his life. At 12:15, he checked his phone. Victoria had texted at 11:52. "On my way at 1:30. Is there anything I should bring?" He typed back, "Just yourself. Lily has the cookies covered." The response came quickly. "Does she know I'm coming?" "She's been talking about it since Wednesday," he wrote. "She finished the drawing Thursday night. She says it's not for sale." 3 dots. Then, "I'll make her an offer she can refuse." He was smiling at his phone when Lily appeared at his elbow. "Is that her?" she demanded. "That's her." "What did she say?" "She said she'll be here." Lily absorbed this with a solemnity that she then immediately abandoned in favor of running back to the refrigerator to check the drawing one more time. Victoria had been ready since noon. She hadn't intended to be ready since noon. She'd told herself she would work through the morning, the Hargrove prep, the Q4 numbers, the agenda for Tuesday's board call, and then get ready at a reasonable hour and drive over at 1:30, like a person who was not anxious about meeting a 7-year-old. She had not worked through the morning. She'd made coffee and read 2 pages of the Hargrove brief, and then found herself thinking about the drawing. 2 lions in the sun, one of them wearing a crown because the lady lion was the boss, and bosses got crowns. That was the rule. Daniel had told her that Thursday night on the phone, casually, in the middle of telling her about the pasta dinner and the oatmeal disaster, and she had sat on her couch in her apartment and felt something move through her chest that she recognized, after a moment, as uncomplicated happiness. Not relief. Not the satisfaction of a goal achieved. Not the particular pride of outperforming expectation. Just happiness. Plain and undecorated. The kind she hadn't felt in long enough that it took a moment to name. She had picked out her outfit Thursday. She'd changed it Friday morning. She'd changed it back Friday night. She was wearing the first choice, dark jeans, a soft burgundy top, her good jacket. And she had been ready since noon, and was now sitting in her living room with Rachel's voice in her head saying, "Go home," and her own voice adding, "You're allowed to want this." She had spent 2 years making herself formidable. She had built the armor back piece by piece, deliberately, because the world required it, and she was not a woman who left herself undefended. She knew how to walk into a room and own it before anyone could define it for her. She knew how to read the calculation in someone's eyes and preempt it. She knew how to need nothing from anyone in a way that looked like strength, and was partly strength, and was partly something else she hadn't wanted to examine too closely. She was examining it now, because she was ready since noon for an art show in a kitchen, hosted by a 7-year-old, and the armor had been on the floor since Wednesday night. and she was beginning to understand that she didn't want to pick it up. At 1:22, she got in her car. She arrived at 1:33, which was 3 minutes late by her internal clock, and probably unnoticeable by everyone else's. The house was on a quiet street, the kind of street that had been the same for 30 years. Trees grown in over the sidewalk, the occasional basketball hoop, the specific lived-in quality of a neighborhood where people knew each other's names. She parked at the curb. She sat for a moment. Then she got out, because she was Victoria Hale, and she did not sit at curbs. Daniel had the front door open before she reached the porch. Not in the hovering way, not like he'd been watching. More like he'd heard the car and moved toward it the way people move toward things they were glad about. "You're here," he said. "I said I would be," she said. "I know." He held the door, and she came through it, and the house was exactly what she had understood it would be from everything he'd told her. Not neat, not messy, just lived in the specific way of a home where a child actually lived, and a man worked with his hands, and nobody was performing domesticity for anyone. There were crayon drawings on the wall of the hallway, actual drawings, framed, 3 of them, and a pair of small sneakers by the door, and the smell of something good from the kitchen, and the sound, unmistakable, of a 7-year-old attempting to be quiet and failing. "She's been waiting," Daniel said quietly, with a particular mixture of apology and amusement of a parent managing an enthusiastic small person. "I heard that," came a voice from the kitchen. "She has excellent hearing," Daniel said. Victoria looked at him. He looked back at her. And in that brief, wordless moment, before the introductions and the cookies and the drawing and all of it, something passed between them that didn't require language. The acknowledgement that this was new, and that new was good, and that neither of them was going to pretend otherwise. "Come on," he said. They went into the kitchen. Lily was standing in front of the refrigerator, with her hands clasped behind her back, and her chin up, in the posture of someone who had rehearsed this moment and was executing it with full commitment. She was wearing a purple shirt with a paint stain on the sleeve that she had clearly decided was not relevant enough to change. She looked at Victoria. Victoria looked at her. For exactly 2 seconds, Lily forgot to be the composed curator of her own art show and was just a 7-year-old looking at a person her dad had talked about in a voice she hadn't heard before. And her expression was simply open, curious, and unguarded, in the complete way that children were before the world taught them to manage their faces. "Hi," Lily said. "Hi," Victoria said. "I'm Victoria." "I'm Lily," Lily said. "I know who you are. Dad said you're remarkable." Victoria glanced at Daniel. He looked at the ceiling briefly. "He said that?" Victoria said. "He says it about things he really means," Lily said, with the authority of an expert. "He said it about Charlene when she finally started in January." "That's high company," Victoria said. "Charlene is very reliable," Lily said seriously. "Come look at the drawing." She stepped aside with the ceremony of someone unveiling something significant and gestured toward the refrigerator. Victoria moved toward it. She looked at the drawing for a long time. The yellow-orange wash of the construction paper sky. The 2 shapes that were unmistakably lions, if you understood the intention. The small crayon crown on the one on the left, drawn with extra care, its points deliberate and clear. "Tell me about it," Victoria said. Lily stood beside her and looked at her own work with the uncomplicated confidence of an artist in front of her own vision. "It's 2 lions in the sun," she said. "This one," she pointed to the crowned one, "is the boss lion. She's in charge. The other one is brave and strong
and he knows the boss lion is the best one, so they go together. Where are they going? Victoria asked. Lily thought about this. Somewhere good, she said. They don't know yet, but it's somewhere good. Victoria looked at the drawing. It's beautiful, she said. And she said it the way she'd said everything to Daniel on Wednesday. Directly, without the softened, elevated praise adults sometimes used with children's art, in a way that meant nothing. She said it like she meant it, because she did. Lily looked at her with the measuring assessment of someone deciding whether a compliment was real. It's not for sale, Lily said. I was going to offer a lot of money, Victoria said. How much? Lily, Daniel said. 100, Victoria said. Lily considered. No, she said firmly. But you can have a cookie.
She produced a plate from the counter.
The good cookies, the frosted ones, arranged with a care that suggested placement had been deliberate, and held it out. Victoria took one. Lily watched her with full attention. They're good, right? Lily said. They're remarkable, Victoria said. Lily's expression broke into the gap-toothed grin, the full one, the one in the photograph Daniel had shown her at the cafe table, the one with the paint on the cheek and the raised masterwork, and the absolute certainty that what she'd made was worth seeing. I picked them, Lily said. They stayed for 3 hours. It had not been Daniel's plan to stay for 3 hours. He'd had a vague sense of the afternoon as a brief, friendly visit. An hour, maybe, sufficient for the art show and the introductions, and then Victoria would have somewhere to be, because she always had somewhere to be, and he'd put Lily to bed, and that would be its own kind of good, the kind you carried quietly. But Lily had other plans. After the art show, which concluded officially when Lily declared it concluded, and moved the cookie plate to the coffee table, she had positioned herself between them on the couch, and begun a guided interrogation of Victoria that was more thorough than Daniel's last bank loan application. She wanted to know what kind of car she drove. She wanted to know if she had a dog. She wanted to know what the company did, in terms that were accurate but accessible. And when Victoria explained it, patient, direct, not talking down, Lily had nodded slowly and said, "So you make things easier for people who have a hard time?" And Victoria had looked at her and said, "That's exactly right," in the voice of someone who had just heard their life's work summarized better than they'd ever managed to themselves. She wanted to know if Victoria could draw. "Not well," Victoria said. "Dad can't either," Lily said, the consolation of someone who has accepted a limitation in someone she loves. "He draws cars, and they look like eggs." "They do not look like eggs," Daniel said. "They look like eggs with wheels," Lily revised. Victoria had drawn a lion at Lily's request on a piece of construction paper provided for the purpose, and it had been objectively not good, and Lily had studied it for a solemn moment and then said, "It looks like a cloud with a face." And Daniel had laughed the way he laughed when something was genuinely funny and he wasn't trying to contain it. And the kitchen had been full of that sound, and Lily's laughter, and Victoria's own voice saying, "That is a fair assessment." And the afternoon had gone on that way, the three of them at the kitchen table with construction paper and crayons, and the cookie plate slowly emptying between them. At some point, Lily had fallen asleep on the couch with a yellow crayon still in her hand, the way children fell asleep, suddenly, completely, without transition, one moment present, and the next simply gone into the easy sleep of someone who had spent the afternoon exactly as she'd hoped. Daniel had covered her with a blanket from the arm of the couch, and turned the lamp down, and come back to the kitchen doorway, where Victoria was putting the crayon caps back on. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I know," she said. She put the last cap on. "She's remarkable." "She takes after her dad," he said, and he was returning her own words to her, the ones she'd said to him on the phone, and she heard them and felt them land
the same way she'd felt everything he said land, with the particular weight of things that were meant.
You said that already, she said.
It's still true. She set the crayon box down and looked at him across the kitchen. This man she had known for 4 days and 3 hours of a Wednesday night and 1 Saturday afternoon. And she did the calculation she always did. The risk assessment, the variables, the projection of outcomes. And then she set the calculation aside, deliberately, the way you set something down when you've decided you don't need it anymore. I have the Hargrove earnings call in 9 days, she said. Okay, he said. I'm going to be difficult to reach that week. I'm not... She paused. I want to be honest with you about what my life looks like. It's not... It's a lot. I know, he said. You don't know yet, she said. Not really. You know the version from one dinner. Then show me the rest of the version, he said. I'll keep up. You're very confident about that. I fixed a 1987 diesel engine last Tuesday that 3 other mechanics said was done, he said. I keep up. Victoria looked at him.
I'm not a 1987 diesel engine, she said.
No, he said. You're considerably more complicated. But the principle applies. She crossed her arms, which was a gesture she used when she was trying not to smile and failing. I'm going to call you this week, she said. I know, he said. Even when it's late. If the call runs long. Call me whenever you want, he said. I'm usually up. And I want... She stopped. Took the breath that honesty sometimes required. I want to come back here. If that's... I want this to be a thing that happens more than once. Daniel looked at her for a moment, in the quiet kitchen with his daughter asleep in the next room, and the crayon box on the counter, and the drawing on the refrigerator. The 2 lions in the sun, one of them crowned, both of them going somewhere good. Victoria, he said. What? I put your name in my phone under Victoria the night we met, he said. No last name. Not Victoria from the date, just your name. He held her gaze. I don't do that with people I'm planning to see once. She looked at him. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. She left at 5:30. Lily had woken from her nap just long enough to say goodbye, with her full attention, standing in the hallway in her socks, blanket around her shoulders, hair loose, blinking in the way of someone recently returned from sleep. Are you coming back? Lily asked. Yes, Victoria said. When? Lily, Daniel said. It's a real question, Lily said. Victoria looked at her, this small person with the crown-drawing certainty that good things should be asked for directly. Soon, Victoria said. I have a work thing this week, but soon after. Lily assessed this for accuracy, appeared satisfied. Okay, she said. I'm going to make another drawing. I'd like to see it, Victoria said. I'll decide if it's ready, Lily said. Of course, Victoria said. Whenever you're ready. Lily nodded once, pulled her blanket tighter, and padded back down the hallway with the particular dignity of a 7-year-old who has concluded the important business of the afternoon and is now returning to her own concerns. Victoria looked after her for a moment. Then she looked at Daniel. Thank you, she said. For what? He said. For Wednesday, she said. For staying. For... She paused, and this was the most unguarded she had been. More than the cafe, more than the office, more than anything in between, because this was the version with no audience, and no statement, and no armor at all. For making it real. Daniel reached over and held her hand for a moment. Just a moment, brief and unhurried. The way he did everything. Not performing, not signaling. Just doing it because she was standing beside him, and it was the right thing to do, and he was a man who did the right thing
when he saw it clearly. "That part was both of us," he said. She nodded. She went to her car.
He stood in the doorway. She did not look in the rearview mirror this time. Not because she didn't want to, but because she didn't need to. She knew he was there. She drove home through the early evening, and the city was the same city it had always been. And she was not the same person she had been 7 days ago. And she did not try to calculate whether that was wise or safe or strategically sound. She let it be true. The Hargrove call came 9 days later, on a Tuesday, and went well. Better than well. The kind of well that turned a room quiet in the best possible way. The quiet of people doing the math and liking the number. Victoria had walked out of the conference room at noon and found Rachel waiting with coffee and the particular expression of someone who already knew and was being polite about it. "Well," Rachel said. "We have the renewal," Victoria said. Rachel closed her eyes briefly, in the way of someone absorbing good news through their whole body. "The extended contract," Victoria said. 5 more years, the full scope." Victoria: "I know. Do you want to?" "I already texted him," Victoria said. Rachel opened her eyes, smiled, not the professional smile, the real one. "What did he say?" she asked. Victoria held up her phone. The text from Daniel read, "Charlene and I are both proud of you. Lily says, and I quote, 'obviously.'" Rachel laughed. Victoria put the phone away and picked up her coffee. "Call the board," she said. "And then, actually, clear my afternoon." "You have the Meridian Compliance Review." "Move it," Victoria said. "I have somewhere to be." She had somewhere to be. That was the thing that had changed. The thing that had been missing for 2 years in the deep-down private accounting of her life. Underneath the wins and the earnings calls, and the early mornings and the fighting for what was hers. She had built everything back. She had done it right. She had proven every single thing she set out to prove. But she had done it alone, in the managed and deliberate solitude of someone who had stopped leaving room for anything that couldn't be controlled. She left room now. She drove to Culver Road. The sign above the bay door said Hayes Auto in plain block letters. The kind that had been there for years and would be there for years more. The kind that did not need to announce itself loudly, because the work behind it spoke for itself. She pulled in, and Daniel came out of the bay wiping his hands on a shop rag. And he looked at her the way he looked at her, completely, without managing it. And she looked back at him and thought, this is what showing up looks like. Not the polished version. Not the version she performed in boardrooms. The actual thing. "The call went well," she said. "I know," he said. "You told me." "I wanted to tell you in person." He looked at her for a moment. Behind him, the shop hummed. The ordinary sound of work being done, of engines being understood, of things being fixed by a man who knew how. "You drove to Culver Road to tell me in person," he said. "I drove to Culver Road," she said, "because Lily said the next drawing is ready." "She finished it this morning," he said. "She's been guarding it since school let out." "What is it?" "She won't tell me," he said. "She says it's for the next show. She says the guest list is the same." Victoria looked at him. "Same time?" she said. "Saturday at 2?" "Saturday at 2, he said. "She has opinions about the cookies again." "The good ones," Victoria said. "The only kind worth serving," he said. She looked at this man in the driveway of his shop on Culver Road. This man who had shown up to a blind date with gas station daisies and a truck named Charlene, and nothing to prove to anyone. Who had sat across a table from her for almost 2 hours and treated every word she said as though it mattered. who had stood on a sidewalk at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday night and said, "I want to see you again," without decoration or strategy, just because it was true, and he saw no reason to say it any other way. She had been set up as a test. She had been filmed without her knowledge. She had been reduced, by people who did not know her, to the chair and the assumption and the bet. And she had answered every single one of those reductions. Not with anger, though the anger was just, but with the simple, undeniable fact of who she was. The CEO. The fighter. The woman who walked back into a boardroom 6 weeks early and dared anyone to tell her she wasn't steady. The woman who had laughed genuinely for the first time in years at a table with slightly wilted daisies because a man who talked to his truck had said exactly the right true thing at exactly the right moment. She had not been broken by what was hard. She had been made more completely herself. And standing here, in the ordinary late afternoon light of a Tuesday, she understood that this, all of it, the dinner and the chaos and the viral video and the phone call and the kitchen and Lily asleep on the couch with a yellow crayon, was not an interruption to the life she had built. It was the rest of it. The part she had forgotten to leave room for. The part that made the rest of it mean something. "Saturday at 2, she said. "Saturday at 2, he said. She was already looking forward to it. Some things don't need to be complicated to be true. Some doors, when they finally open all the way. And some people, the ones who show up with the right flowers and the right honesty and the right willingness to stay, turn out to be exactly what the story needed all along, hiding in plain sight at table 7, in a cafe on Meridian Street, on an ordinary Wednesday night that turned out to be anything but. They had both walked in expecting very little. They had both walked out carrying something they intended to keep. And that, in the end, was the whole story. Not the bet, not the camera, not the 500,000 strangers on the internet who had watched 4 minutes of something real and recognized it for what it was. The whole story was two people who chose, despite everything, to show up honestly. And it turned out that was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.